All right. Can you hear me now? All right, good. All right, I was in the midst of thanking Dara and Ethan for their fantastic presentation. Really enjoyed hearing the insights from all of the research you did, and I want to foot stomp something that you shared, which is that we are stronger when we do this work together as companies and organizations. This is inclusion is not a competitive sport, so I want to reiterate that message and also put a call out to all the other companies and organizations out there. Boeing would love to partner to advance inclusion and equity globally, however we can, because all ships will rise. So I wanted to share a couple of things that the Boeing company has been doing. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Two topics. One is around transparency, and the other is around a culture effort we've launched called Seek, Speak, and Listen. So if I am able to do this, I think I can. Am I sharing? I am. Okay. So last summer, about a year ago, we as a company, like many organizations, took a really hard look at ourselves and where we were in terms of racial equity. We put together a racial equity steering team, and we sat down and mapped out 19 specific commitments around race equity. One of those commitments was to be transparent. And for a company like Boeing that has always been very careful with its data, very cautious about sharing, this is a very bold move. But we know that in order to come out the other side of this, to really make a difference, to really move the needle, we have to be transparent. Transparency not only drives accountability, which is hugely important, but it also empowers us as a workforce. When we all are singing from the same score, we all know where we stand, we know where we're heading, we become empowered to be allies on the journey. So we launched the company's first ever public report on diversity and inclusion just a few weeks ago. The company's almost 105 years old. This is the first of its kind. So it is a big deal, and it's the first, but won't be the last, because we've committed to do this every single year. We committed to doing something that was honest, that was clear and specific. And when I say that, I mean it's not a report full of corporate speak. I think it is not full of cliches. It is not the metrics we share are not numbers we're particularly proud of. It is simply the truth. It is simply where we are, what we're working on, and where we think we're heading. So on this slide, I've just pulled out a few images, right? We know we want our report to be very people forward, because it's the people that drive the outcomes, and our people are amazing, and this helps us drive inclusion. We share our data, and I've done a little excerpt there, but you can go check out our public report. We've done more cuts of data by more groups and subgroups than I think any of our peer companies. Again, not as a bragging point, but because we need to put it out there so that we can get better and move through it. We've outlined 6 very specific aspirations in terms of goals. And then the other thing we did was acknowledge what's not in the report, right? We don't yet have good data around LGBTQ. We don't yet have good data around disability. We are not in this report sharing intersectional data yet. We know these are important aspects of diversity. We want to get to that place, and we're just not there yet. But we thought rather than just be silent on it, we wanted to acknowledge it and explain why we're not there yet. So that's what I wanted to share around transparency. And how we got to the final result. This was all built in-house, by the way. We didn't hire a PR firm to do this. We spent a lot of time with our employees. The comments about listening that Dara and Ethan shared, we spent a lot of time listening to our people. We spent a lot of time with our racial equity task force, with our business resource groups, hearing from them what was important to include in the report. And we factored in that input in the final result. We also engaged, before we launched it, a couple of firms just to poke as many holes in this as they could, so that we went in eyes wide open and we were fully prepared. And that kind of self-critical work, that really leaning into listening, even if it's uncomfortable, is the path we're on, because we know it's what we need to do to get better. And that leads me to the next thing that I wanted to share, which is an effort we recently deployed at our company that we call Seek, Speak, and Listen. Now, this is not couched as a diversity effort, but as I walk you through these habits, you'll see how they are foundational to inclusion. Right? So these three behaviors, number one is seek. And when we talk about seeking, we are talking about leaning into pockets of anxiety, leaning into discomfort, distress, right? All of us, whether we're leaders or individual contributors, we know when there are those moments, right, where people on the team are feeling uncomfortable or anxious about something. And I think oftentimes the human tendency is to want to avoid that, right? Not to lean into it. Or, after George Floyd's murder last year, there were a lot of people who kind of didn't want to talk about it because it made them uncomfortable. But we have to lean into that, because that's where we're going to learn. And this is a behavior we've asked every single Boeing employee to lean into. We've got training on it, how to seek, what that looks like. Same with speak, right? Speaking up because it's the right thing to do. Not only speaking up for us as a company in terms of safety and quality and production, but speaking up to address and identify bias, call it out. And we've gotten much more rigorous around that and much more supportive of each other. And then finally, listening, right? Listening not to respond, listening not to judge, but listening truly to learn. That is a shift for many people and for an organization, to be able to stand back and say, I don't have all the answers, and I trust the collective intelligence of this team, of this room, to have the answers. And the way we get there is by genuinely listening to each other. So these habits, I know they sound so simple, but they're very challenging to put into practice in a consistent way. We're really excited about this because we know these habits will drive not only the business outcomes and build stronger teams like we've talked about, but this is inclusion, right? If we treat each other in this way, this is inclusion. And so to the detractors that Ethan and Dara pointed out on their grid, this is another way to pull people into the inclusion conversation without them even knowing that's what we're doing. These are the habits that drive the outcomes we seek through inclusion, right? It's everyone having a voice, everyone feeling valued. When we're experiencing that discomfort, we get to uncover it, so that we get to a better place as a team and as an organization. So Seek, Speak, and Listen, this is Boeing's big kind of culture effort this year. It's embraced at all levels, and we're really excited about it. And that's what I wanted to share.
Thanks, Sarah. I encourage people to put some questions in the Q&A, and I know that there's going to be some that are Sarah, that want more specifics on those 3 steps of Seek, Speak, and Listen. So, just taking Seek, can you give us a couple of the really specific things Boeing is doing to encourage employees to seek?
Yeah, so we also partnered with Neuroscience Institute to help us with Seek. So we created some training, some videos that are very specific to Boeing. But we're asking for people to share their stories. So we have the Seek, Speak, and Listen moments. We have a website that's available to everyone where they share what a seeking moment was for them and what learning it led to. And it might be, someone shared that he was meeting with a team and they were kind of quiet. And then as he continued to seek and ask questions, someone mentioned a bottleneck in this quality process, and then he explored that further, and it was able to uncover, a blockage in our system and process that was threatening results, and they were able to address that and change it. So that's what we talk about when we talk about seeking, is pausing in those moments to really listen to what's going on, listen with our ears, but also our hearts, so that we can, we can get through it and to a better place.
Another question on the seek, speak, and listen. How do you implement that across groups?
Yeah, well, we had it was a 4-week program for the month of May. So we did 1 habit a week for 3 weeks, kind of a sprint. So everyone worked on Seek week 1, everyone worked on Speak week 2, and Listen week 3. And then we're in week 4 right now, which we call our capstone week. This is all socially learned, by the way. Teams are doing this together. And so in week 4, we bring it all together. We create action plans as teams and individual plans as well. So that's our big kickoff. And then throughout the year, we're using behavioral nudges as well to remind people to use the behaviors. We're going to do spotlights and stories and recognition throughout the year to sustain it, but it's also being integrated into everything we do. So our safety management system, our Speak Up portal, leadership messaging, it's being threaded and embedded and integrated in all that we do.
Okay, great. Going back to the transparency piece, there's some questions there. What really led to the shift in perspective at Boeing that had you decide now to publish that data?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, Forbes wrote an article about this transparency and said the fact that Boeing did this year when we're having so many financial troubles, it's publicly known as a company, really says something about our commitment, and that's true. So why did we do it now? Number one is because it is a very serious commitment. It is from the very top of our company. We know we can't be the company we need to be if we don't get this right. It's not a corporate line. It is believed heart and soul from the top down, at least in the upper levels of leadership. We have been on a path of transparency as a company generally, even outside of the DEI space. We have new leadership. Our CEO is huge on transparency. It's okay for us to make mistakes. We can acknowledge them, we can learn from them, and we get better, right? And there is a power in doing that. It is a growth mindset. It is a continuous learning culture that we're really trying to embrace in everything we do. And diversity inclusion is no exception. So we wanted to put it out there along with everything else we're kind of putting out there, saying this is where we are. It's not where we want to be. And this sets no limit on where we can go, because this is our vision, and we won't stop until we get there.
Well, I think it's just a great example that, even if you are in business challenges, these things are still really important to do to advance there. So that's terrific. You also mentioned you're not able to report yet on some things like intersectionality. How do you get there?
Yeah, it's a great question. Some of it is self-ID campaign. I think Yolanda talked about this too, right? You've got to get, it's data in, data out. So we just launched self-ID for gender identity and sexual orientation this year. Our response rate is very low. And we can't report those numbers until we have a sufficient response rate. So we're really trying to encourage people to self-ID. There's a lot of inclusion messaging that comes along with that as to why it's important. Same with disability, right? There's still so much stigma, unfortunately, attached that people, there's not a whole, the message around what's in it for me is not very strong. And so we need to do a better job as a company to convey why we should be doing this. What's in it for a person to go in there and self-disclose this thing that they may feel is very private to them. And so it's things like that, but it's also the bedrock work of ensuring that we have the support in place, the strategies in place, that when we do share the data, it's not going to fall into a vacuum, but that we've got the support structure around it to take action to improve. And so we want to make sure that some of those things are in place as well before we go, really public with some of the numbers.
Okay, great. Well, in our last minute here, Sarah, one last question from an attendee. Who drives the D&I strategy there? Do you have employee leads councils, or Do employees lead councils who provide input, or is it more of an HR initiative? What are the basic building blocks there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I report into the CHRO, who is a great champion for diversity inclusion. So we do have that, I think, fairly traditional model, because our primary focus as a B2B, it really is about our talent right now. It's less about the marketplace. So we have that. We have 152 chapters of business resource groups. We have diversity councils at sites. We've just launched an inclusion ambassador network that we bring together every month to help, kind of drive inclusion within their team. So we work it on a number of levels and layers, which I think is absolutely necessary to make this embedded truly in our company's DNA.
All right, terrific. Thank you. I want to thank you as well for being our company spotlights today. I'm sure many of our attendees took away some key insights from what you shared, and we appreciate your partnership and your openness to do this today.